What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast on this Monday, August 19th, an ominous Monday for Bills Mafia as the injury news came down from Sean McDermott a little bit earlier today. We're going to get into all of that in a few moments. I see Sophia in the comments says, please let there be good audio. Cursed those the Wi-Fi at our Acrisure Stadium. It was pretty bad the other day. We apologize about that, but we're back in the saddle. Ryan and Olean, I'm here in Buffalo, and we got a big show for you today. Ryan, August 31st, the next live show. We are 12 days away. Get it in your calendars. If you're going to be in Buffalo, if you're in drivable distance, head out to Wingnuts, 1402 Millersport Highway. The party is back. Every month we go to Wingnuts. It's an awesome time. We can't wait for that live show.
Yeah, it's always a great time at Wingnuts. Come join us. We'll be talking about the final roster, the practice squad, looking toward week one of the NFL schedule and that matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. And, who knows? We might have a lot of new information based on some of these injuries and the players that are week to week going into week one of the regular season.
So there's a lot of injury stuff to get into here, right? And we got to kind of prioritize, and I think where I started, and you can see in the headline here, is Curtis Samuel, because you look at a new look offense and what potentially this thing's going to be in 2024. I think Curtis Samuel is about as big of a part of it as you can get. I think you have Josh Allen in his own tier. I think you have Dalton Kincaid in his own tier. And then after that, I think it's a collection of guys, one of them being Curtis Samuel. Sean McDermott revealed today that he's dealing with a turf toe situation, and they're expecting him to be week to week. It's a weird kind of switch. They talked about last week when he didn't practice for a couple of days, said it was general soreness. So maybe it was some just general foot soreness that as the days went on and they maybe took a longer look at it, it was, determined that it was a bit of a turf toe situation. Now, I'm no medical expert. I did a little research before the show. There are 3 different grades, 1, 2, or 3 for turf toe injuries. So depending on where he falls on that scale, we could be talking about a couple days, a couple weeks, or something even that, we've seen it in the past, Ryan. It could be something that lingers a long time.
Yeah, and we don't know the grade of it. You hope that based on the general soreness designation, it's on that lower end of the scale. And if so, the Bills have been proactive about it, kind of kept him out for a week already. And maybe he'll be good to go by week one. But until we know more details on that, you're right. It's a scale that varies from one side to the next. And we've seen players who get turf toe and it lingers throughout the year, or it pops up again in terms of an issue for a player. And you hope that's not the case with Curtis Samuel, because this is a player who is joining a team where he's familiar with the offense. I'm sure Joe Brady has a big role in mind for him, whether you're talking out of the slot, whether you're talking outside receiver, putting him at running back, moving him around as a movable chess piece of sorts. He's going to have a big role in this offense. So you hope that he's 100% come week one.
This is an injury I was reading that he's dealt with before. We haven't had a chance to talk to Curtis at all. The Bills will practice the next couple of days. And, listen, the injury list is so long that Sean McDermott is pivoting off of his original plan, which was to play the starters against the Panthers this weekend. I don't know about that original plan. Like I would have said all the starters this week, even before the injuries. But now with the injuries, it's definitely the second team that will play against the Panthers. But for Samuel, he's in a good spot. I mentioned that he'd had this injury before because I think the Bills do a good job of making sure that guys are as close to 100% before getting them back out there. And I don't think that you want to rush him back knowing the kind of season or volume that I think that you're expecting out of him. I think you can make an argument that the volume in this offense potentially there for Samuel is greater than anything he saw at all while he was in Washington, and maybe even more than the majority of his time in Carolina.
Yeah, it absolutely could be because of how important he is maybe to this scheme and what Brady wants to do with him in this offense. So erring on the side of caution is definitely the way to go right now. The Bills erring on the side of caution with all their starters going into this last preseason game. That's definitely the right move. I was a little surprised when Sean McDermott said he had planned to play them. Especially after what had happened with, Matt Milano this past week and how they pivoted quickly to make sure Terrell Bernard was not going to play. He said post game that as soon as that news came down about Milano, they weren't going to play Bernard. They didn't want to risk any more injury at that position. And, you see what happened in the game, though, on Saturday night. Now you do have to take it very carefully with your starters, but also your depth players. So when you look at it, the silver lining in all of this is going to be the Bills can really evaluate those guys that are going to be fighting for either A, 2 or 3 roster spots on this team, and then B, guys that are fighting for a lot of practice squad spots on this team. So, if you're someone that has tickets for Kids Day, go enjoy all the scenes beforehand. But I apologize for the product on the field. You're going to probably see a lot of handoffs and some iffy quarterback play at best.
Yeah, and we'll see, because the quarterback play hasn't been great to this point, right?
Right.
Like I mean, watching Trubisky the other day, I know he's dealing with the knee injury. We're going to get into him in a minute. I want to hit on MBS before we get there. The Bills have, an interesting opportunity here to find somebody that could fit in the system. Do they want to go to the guys that have been in the building before? That could be a route that you go. Obviously, the Matt Barkleys of the world out there. It's funny. I mean, if he wasn't so long removed from playing, Davis Webb, who is now like the talk of the town in terms of the work he's doing in the quarterback's room in Denver, he'd probably come in here and give you some pretty decent play, knowing, the bones of this system that I still think is there from the Dable days. But either way, I mean, people were clamoring on social media for Ryan Tannehill on Saturday. And I know he's probably sitting out there hoping that some type of better opportunity to playing time exists. But I think you could come up with a lot worse situations than being the backup to Josh Allen at this point in 2024 for Tannehill.
Yeah, you're right. And it depends on, again, they designated Trubisky as week to week. You'd have to convince Tannehill, A, that he's going to get a true opportunity to be that quarterback too, even when Trubisky's back in the fold. And, it wouldn't be hard to maybe convince him of that based on the play we've seen from Trubisky. I still think Tannehill might end up being a pipe dream, like you said. He's going to want a better opportunity. When I say better opportunity, probably a spot where he could come in and start some games this season for a team. And you look around the league, there's a few spots there, but it would have to be based on an injury. A starter would have to go down probably early in the regular season. Then he would get called, get a few weeks to kind of ramp things up, and then get into action with that new team. So
interesting. We got some breaking news here, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead.
The Bills are signing former Baltimore Ravens quarterback Anthony Brown, according to Tom Pelissero. Obviously a guy that has some mobility. I'm going to actually bring him up on the screen here, but I remember him, if I'm not mistaken, having a really nice game in place of Lamar Jackson in recent years. Do you remember Anthony Brown at all?
They've had some decent backup play come through there, but I'm kind of blanking on.
I'm mistaken. I'm mistaken. That's not who I was thinking of. I must have been thinking of
Pro Bowl.
Who was the quarterback that came in Baltimore? That had a pretty good couple of games there. It wasn't Josh Dobbs, because I don't even know if he was.
No. I know who you mean, and I'm looking up right now because he made the Pro Bowl as so many alternates they went through.
All right, while you're looking that up, this is a former Boston College and Oregon quarterback, went undrafted in 2022, signed by the Baltimore Ravens, and then he ended up on the Las Vegas Raiders roster here in 2024. He was waived on August 16th, 3 days ago, as Gardner Minshew is kind of taking control of that job there. A guy that they're adding to the mix here, and they might not be done, Ryan. I mean, you get Anthony Brown in here. If Mitchell Trubisky is going to be out for a couple of weeks, which could be a possibility here, according to Sean McDermott. Now you're talking about Ben DiNucci, who's in off the streets, and now Anthony Brown thrown into the mix. It's going to kind of be how much can you impress them in a short amount of time?
Yeah, and the chat is full here. Tyler Snoop Huntley was the quarterback you were thinking.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. My
Had that
bad.
playoff game where like he fumbled going on the QB sneak into the end zone. They would have knocked off the Bengals had that happen, but he had, a nice job there. The Bills probably do need to keep looking for a quarterback. I don't know if Brown's going to be a viable, backup option or even a number 3 option when Trubisky comes back from this injury. But right now, it's kind of just a body for a preseason game, and that's what they need between DiNucci and him. They're going to kind of probably hand the ball off a lot. It hurts the evaluations when it comes to maybe these wide receivers and tight ends. I can't imagine it being a very pass-heavy offensive game plan, though, in this preseason finale against the Panthers.
What does this tell you about I think it tells you something about the Trubisky injury, because I think going out and bringing in a guy like Brown tells you that they still have Trubisky in mind. Like, I don't think you're comfortable going into the season with just Brown and DiNucci as your options at backup quarterback. So I'm sitting here thinking maybe this Trubisky thing is a shorter term injury. Otherwise, they'd probably go in a more drastic direction.
Yeah, and when you look at the Trubisky injury, you could probably, put a brace on the knee at some point. If he's week to week, you're still talking we're multiple weeks away from week 1. Good chance that he's at least good enough to be that backup come week 1 for the Bills or very early in the season. So that's why they didn't go out and sign, a Ryan Tannehill or make a big splash. They probably are feeling pretty good about Trubisky's timeline. Now, as the weeks go on here leading up to the regular season, if they're not seeing the improvement in the knee for him, then maybe they do have to make a more drastic move. But like I said, this just feels more like we need a guy to be out there. We can't just ask Ben DiNucci to play all 4 quarters. He's one hit away from being out of action, and then who knows what they would have to do there for emergency QB situation. But it's a good opportunity for Brown nonetheless.
You went back at this point, watched the game. You also put out the PFF grades and had some reaction to that to our insiders. What did you make of Trubisky's performance in general? Because, live watching it play out, I thought it was bad, and I kind of went back, and there was a couple of plays in there, especially the throw to Zach Davidson, that I thought was a little bit better than I remembered it in real time. But I asked Sean McDermott about what he's made of Trubisky's play to this point, because you got the injury, but he's kind of seems locked in as your backup. And I know there's a lot of Bills fans that are a little bit unsettled with that. And he said, I think we've been able to move the ball at times, but not enough. Some of that really drives our stalling, or we're getting off schedule, and it makes it really hard to move the chains or get into the rhythm because of the pre-snap penalty. So a little bit of an excuse built in there for Trubisky, some of the other stuff, the uncontrollables that may be sabotaging these drives. So I'll start there. But I think Mitch has done some real good things. And then the other night, I'm sure there are some plays he wants back as well. So obviously what we saw in that game from McDermott as well, it is kind of like of the life of a backup in this situation, in the role that he currently is in with us, to go in at a moment's notice. And in fairness to him, I made the call to not play Josh in pregame, in warmups. When I saw the conditions due to the weather that came through, I thought there were some things he did well, and then honestly some things he wants back also. So, Mitch Trubisky got the green light to play minutes before the game, which is a true backup quarterback scenario. He went in there, probably would have liked to have seen more, but Sean McDermott mentioning, that's sometimes how it goes with backups.
Yeah, to answer your original question, I don't feel Trubisky has played well at all through 2 games. Even watching back, that throw to Davidson was probably his throw of the preseason. It's his best one to me that he's had thus far. The first game, you could blame the offensive line. They did a poor job protecting him, but I thought more times than not, minus the first drive against Pittsburgh, the O-line held up very well for him. He just held the ball too long. He missed open receivers on some plays, dancing around, trying to make things happen at times, the bad interception. I don't feel like he has come in and looked any better than a Kyle Allen. And, you remember how low we were on Kyle Allen last year in the play that we saw from him at training camp and throughout the preseason. At the end of the day, though, this is a team that's going to ride with Josh Allen as far as they possibly can. If it were up to Trubisky or just about any other backup in this league, this team's season will effectively be over.
Thank you for watching on this Monday evening right here on Shout. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. We're going to get to the safety situation here in a few moments. I want to talk about rookie running back Ray Davis as well. But before we get there, Marquez Valdes-Scantling went off on a cart with the neck injury in the game on Saturday. Saw him walking around a little bit after the game, which I think was, good news. He's kind of tabbed as week to week. So you're talking about Samuel out of that wide receiver room. You're talking about MVS now out of that wide receiver room. Let's reshuffle the deck here. What does that mean for this potential starting lineup? You have Matt Collins and Keon Coleman, who are kind of in their own pot. You have Khalil Shakir. This feels like a huge opportunity for Tyrell Shavers here in this last preseason game. It's been a quiet preseason for Shavers. And then if he makes it through final cuts, a potential big opportunity to start the season. Because I think he's a little bit different than Keon Coleman and Mac Hollins, who I think fit more into that X role in this offense. Could it mean something more for Andy Isabella? Scott Banker brings him up, and he said hi at the beginning. What's up, Scott? Who do you think these injuries, you hate to phrase it like this, but benefit the most or give a big opportunity to?
I would go with Shavers, number one, because of the camp that he's had. But going back to what I said earlier, I don't know how any wide receiver is going to be able to shine in this final preseason game minus special team snaps, blocking and run blocking, that is, things of that nature. Maybe even a KJ Hamler. Hamler graded out very well, Pro Football Focus. He's has some chances for return responsibilities too. So there's an opportunity for him as well. Those would be the top two guys off the top of my head that would, like you said, you don't want to say benefit the most from injuries, but truly do benefit from what happened in terms of making this initial roster, and come week one, potentially play some significant or at least some snaps with Josh Allen at quarterback.
Yeah, I think I'm really watching what Shavers does this weekend, the problem that he's facing and all these wide receivers are facing, and how much do we think that maybe the preseason has been a result of there's quiet preseason has been a result of bad quarterback play. And I don't see that necessarily improving a ton. Elliot says Matt's outfit tonight makes me want to say go Cuse. I got the Mets hat on. One of our favorite stadiums. That's another thing. Side note, people all the time see me wear a Yankees hat and a Mets hat, and they're like, what's going on here? And I've kind of adopted if I like the team's stadium, I'm going to rock their hat. They're in Major League Baseball. I got a Pittsburgh Steelers or Pittsburgh Pirates hat. That's added to the collection. You're going to see that make its debut. PNC Park is top notch. We didn't talk about this the other night, Ryan. We went to go see Paul Skeens, and it was an absolutely beautiful night. 6 Ks, ended up getting the win. That was a pretty cool night on Friday night.
Yeah, great night. Beautiful ballpark. Cannot say enough good things about PNC Park. Awesome to get to kind of walk around. No, we had great seats first and foremost. Shout out to you for that. But then getting up to walk around pregame and watch him throw the football around with his warm up. The way they have it designed, that there's areas for you to stand pregame or even between innings and get a really cool view of the ball game itself and the field as well, which spectacular skyline and background behind it as well.
I saw an interesting comment on social media. We've been talking a lot about wide receivers, and it's 2024, so why not just throw this under the pile? What would you think about a veteran minimum deal for Juju Smith-Schuster?
I wouldn't hate it. I think that he still has a little bit of juice left. I think that anything that could have
a little bit wrong, of Juju juice left.
A little bit. I like that. I think anything that could have gone wrong did go wrong during that stint in New England. Someone else on social media was asking about Michael Thomas. Yeah, he's another player that you could look at. I saw reports about Jahan Dotson potentially being available. I don't necessarily believe that. I think his coach is just trying to motivate him a little bit, talking about how, the number 2 receiver job is still up for grabs there. I don't think he's available. There's guys out there. And if you do have some bad news, if you think the turf toe is going to linger For a Curtis Samuel, you might want to be proactive and get someone that you think can come in and be productive, that has been productive in this league before. So wouldn't be completely against the idea of a Smith Schuster.
I don't know. There's a couple factors here for me. Number one, my feelings on Juju have been well documented on this show, going back to his Steelers days, the 50-yard line, TikTok dances. Like, I don't know. Like, that was just never, I wasn't a huge fan of it. Now, seeing him go to Kansas City and the success that he had that year kind of opened your eyes a little bit. He obviously was able to settle into a championship culture, figure out a way to have a role. The only problem here is Samuel and Smith Schuster aren't really like swappable pieces. Like
Right.
Schuster is a little bit more of that possession receiver a la a Khalil Shakir. And I think Shakir is much better at this stage of his career. And probably, I think year 3 Khalil, this might be a little bit hyperbolic to say, but I would take year 3 Khalil over any single season of Juju Smith-Schuster. And that, a big reason for that is because I thought his early career success was based on Antonio Brown still being at the peak of his game and being this kind of secondary target. When Antonio Brown left, his production fell off a cliff. So I think I'm good on the Juju Smith-Schuster area or idea. But I do think that, Dotson, thinking about a couple other options. I mean, listen, we don't know the extent of the injury details of Chase Claypool. That could have been a handshake deal, an injury settlement, and maybe he's in play a few weeks from now, depending on how long that injury was going to be.
Yeah, and if he's still out there, it could be a main roster signing after the time runs off on that, because the Bills obviously have to wait a certain amount of time based on the injury settlement, that 3-week period plus whatever the time is that they agreed upon to. But if not main roster, he just makes so much sense in my eyes in terms of a practice squad spot where once he's healthy enough, you can sign him to the practice squad. You can elevate him in games. So that's someone else to watch. The Bills obviously have a good idea about Curtis Samuel. And yeah, I saw someone else saying we do know like the extent of the injury because he was listed as week to week. That's not necessarily true. The Bills might just be saying that to give him that extra amount of time and rest to get him closer. He could be on the good side of this injury in terms of almost being over it, but there's no reason to get him out there in the preseason finale. There's no reason to rush him back. He knows the system better than any receiver on the team currently. Over the course of the year, that might change, obviously, as they get more experience in it. But the fact that he's already played for Joe Brady certainly benefits him in terms of not needing as many reps necessarily, whether we're talking preseason games or even practice reps.
One more thought on the quarterbacks before we get out of here, like an idea. I've seen a couple of people talking about, maybe a guy like Bailey Zappi if he gets cut or something in that category. What do you think about the idea of the Bills calling up the Titans and seeing if a day 3 pick could get them Malik Willis as a guy that I think both of us really liked him coming out as like a day 3 or late day 2, day 3 guy. He went a little bit higher than that, but somebody that has some mobility, has an arm. I don't know, just somebody to kind of throw into the mix. Like, they're not going to keep 3 quarterbacks. So I don't think that they're necessarily going to go that route if they believe in Trubisky getting himself back. But I like the idea of finding a backup quarterback that could do some of the things that Josh does in terms of the mobility. I'm not sitting here putting Malik Willis in the category of Allen as a thrower, of course. But just an idea. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. The Bills have a lot of draft capital for next year. They could send a late day 3 pick and try to develop those traits with that the Titans have not been able to do to date. Like you said, definitely a mobile quarterback has shown some signs at times when early in his career when given chances, but there's been a lot of downplay as well. So not against that, but a guy like Bailey Zappi, who you also mentioned, makes a ton of sense. He's going to end up being that QB4 on the Patriots. They're not going to keep 4 quarterbacks. So I wouldn't hate that idea. There's going to be a lot of, interesting names released here in just a few weeks when teams cut their rosters down. So the Bills will have options if they are serious about either trying to give another player a shot to be that QB2, but with Trubisky's contract, it's hard to envision that. But they could also get a solid quarterback maybe on their practice squad, knowing full well that it's probably time to go the young route and try to develop someone in that spot to bring along. If not, then I would say attack it in the draft next year. Again, day 3 at some point, someone with developmental traits that you can bring along. So the Bills aren't necessarily in the same situation year after year where they're bringing in veterans and those veterans aren't necessarily giving you much confidence in their play.
Let's move on to the safety position here because, man, is this a group that's been absolutely ravaged by injuries, and it continues to be in that situation. So right now, if you take a look at their depth chart, they have 8 safeties. 3 of them aren't able to play right now this Saturday against the Panthers. You got Damar Hamlin, who is dealing with a hamstring injury, and Sean McDermott said he's going to be week to week. So might put his status for the opener in some jeopardy. Then you have Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop, who have been battling injuries of their own for the last couple of weeks. Some good news on them. They're going to return to practice this week, do some individual drills, which is more than they've done since either of their injuries. Yeah. But Ryan, as we're sitting here right now, if they don't get to a point where they're ready for the opener, the 3 of these guys, what do the Bills do here? Is it Kareem Jackson? Do they have to think outside the box and bring somebody else in? Cam Lewis obviously would probably be the guy that starts, but like Kareem Jackson and D. Delaney and Terrell Burgess, whoever ends up being those depth guys would be one play away from having to play.
Yeah, it's very concerning. I think Cam Lewis would start with Taylor Rapp if Cole Bishop and Mike Edwards were not ready for week 1, if Hamlin's not ready for week 1. I think that the fact that you're getting both Edwards and Bishop back in like the individual periods, individual work, is an encouraging sign for week 1. Hamlin, I'm not shutting the door on him being ready for week 1 either. So come week 1, they might actually be, fully ready to go. But if they are not, Lewis showed that he could, he held on the fort very well. Preseason game, I know, lack of game planning. His versatility would make me think he would start opposite Taylor Rapp. And for the Bills, you don't ever want to say that you don't want to get your best guys out there on the field, but they do got to be smart with these safeties, Matt. Week 1 is not a meaningless game, but it's against an NFC opponent. If you have a guy that's not quite at 100%, like a Cole Bishop, for instance, I'm not rushing to get him out there for week 1. If you have a Mike Edwards or a Damar Hamlin that can start opposite Taylor Rapp, it comes down to being smart about the length of this season, making sure your players are going to be out there for the majority of those games. So that's way out of the way. That's still a few weeks away for the Bills to figure out, but err on the side of caution with these injuries. I know they're beat up and they've been banged up at safety. If you have to go 1 week, though, with a Cam Lewis, Taylor Rapp situation with some of those depth safeties that you mentioned, a Kareem Jackson, I'm okay with it for like a 1 week scenario. D. Delaney hasn't done much this summer in terms of giving me any kind of confidence in his play, but the Bills will have to kind of cross that bridge when they get there.
We are here on Shout on a Monday evening, turning into night here. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. Ryan, I went back and watched that game, and I came away with real excitement about the first season potential of Ray Davis. And we've talked so much about him over the course of the offseason, what he can be as potentially like his ceiling being like that sidekick or like a secondary option to James Cook. I think we could be sitting here in December or January talking about him being like, not surpassing James Cook, but being just as important to what they're doing on offense and in the run game. He's so elusive. I love how urgent he is. I know I'm going to keep saying that, but he has got an extra little like speed, a gear that he hits the line of scrimmage with. I was really impressed with him the other day.
There's no dancing around. That's not saying that the Bills have a running back room full of guys that dance around, but he just, as soon as that hole emerges, he's there. He's through it. He's moving on. He has a little bit of burst in his game. He has some, for a rookie, some grown man strength, I'll call it, in terms of being able to stiff arm and and power through arm tackles. It's very encouraging. You see him average over 7 yards a carry against the Steelers. Just, how great he was in terms of knowing as soon as that hole was there, I'm going to be through it. I'm going to move on to that second level. He could get around the outside and make plays there. He could easily be the 1B to James Cook's 1A at the end of this rookie season, which is impressive because, I remember a month ago talking about Ty Johnson pre-injury and how it would be very hard to surpass him come week one because of how good Johnson was in the run game and as a receiver and as a blocker. But Davis, ever since Johnson went down with that injury, has checked every box. He's done a great job in pass protection. He's done a great job running the ball. We know he has good hands. He can do a little bit of everything for this offense. And as the season goes on, I do think you see his role get bigger and bigger to where it does kind of cut in a little bit to James Cook's workload, maybe more so than some would imagine.
Yeah, I was thinking like 60 or 70% of the touches in the run game for James Cook this season because of the depth chart. But man, I'm flipping on that. Like, I really think Ray Davis is going to have a defined role. I think what stood out to me more than even the runs is the pass protection. Like, he is a willing blocker. He doesn't look uncomfortable. I think that's an area where, I'm excited maybe tomorrow to talk to Joe Brady about what he's seen on tape and in the practice setting from Ray Davis in some of those pass protection situations, because that was one of the bullets on his scouting report that I thought was something that you got excited about.
Yeah, 100%. And you go back, you look at the college tape and the film, and you saw the production, but you just wondered, would there be any kind of delay in terms of learning the NFL game, getting used to the speed of the game? We're not necessarily seeing that. I know he struggled in the first preseason matchup against Chicago, but just about everyone on Buffalo's offense did because of the O-line play and lack of game planning. I really do think that this is a player, and maybe part of it is his age and his experience. He is more NFL ready maybe than some of his other peers that were in this draft class at running back.
It is 6:05 on Monday evening. The Bills have a practice week starting tomorrow in Orchard Park. They'll play the Carolina Panthers. It's going to be all backups on Saturday, but I think that's fine, Ryan. Like, when there's a couple guys in a bunch of different position groups that I think this team has to really get a long look at. Zach Davidson, to me, being at the top of the list. Like, if he ends up getting the start, which I think that he will, and play potentially the whole first half or into the third quarter, you're going to get a really good look at what he's able to do against that Panthers defense. Quentin Morris has a shoulder injury. He's likely going to be out for a couple weeks. We don't know the details on that. Sean McDermott, actually, when asked about those four players, Trubisky, Morris, MVS, and Samuel, and I think throw Balin Spector in there as well. He's dealing with the calf injury. And surprise, surprise, Balin Spector is going to be week to week again with an injury during the preseason. It's like every season. You feel for the guy. Like, I know we talked about year after year, this is a storyline. And I think you just get to a point when somebody's body is just betraying them that you feel for the person, because it looks like he's putting in a lot of hard work. He's had himself a really nice summer. Can't get over the hump. But Sean McDermott said putting those five guys in a bucket, some he's more concerned about than others. And so now you got to play the guessing game. Like, who's in a worse spot? Who's going to be out with a little bit longer? Maybe you eliminate Trubisky because of the approach that they've taken at quarterback. But one more note on him, as the show's going on, that news broke earlier. The Bills have signed Anthony Brown. Our buddy Chris Trapasso put out when he was at Oregon, really nice runner. Yeah, had 9 touchdowns as a runner that year, 600 yards on the ground. So he's somebody that, if you have to get him out in space, if you have to get him off schedule, maybe he can do some things.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of running opportunities for him on Saturday when he gets into the game. But going back to those players and the injuries, huge opportunity for Zach Davidson based on what happened with Quentin Morris and the fact that he is week to week. You hope, again, that Morris is someone that they feel confident will be ready for week one. If not, come the day of the roster cutdowns, maybe they use an IR spot on a Morris that they can bring him back. But you hope the severity of it is he's ready to go week one. They don't have to do that because he is so good on special teams. He's had a fine training camp as well. The way that, through the 2 preseason games pre-Quentin Morris injury, I was starting to believe that maybe the Davidson pushing for a job as tight end 3 wasn't necessarily as real as I thought it was during training camp in terms of the snap count when he was getting into the game. Or maybe that was Buffalo's plan, was to hide him a little bit in the preseason, but it did feel like it was trending toward Quentin Morris almost being, in my eyes, that clear-cut number 3. But if this injury gives Davidson a chance to not only shine on Saturday in the preseason finale, but if it's something where Morris's injury is going to linger into the regular season, this is huge for him because he does have a good knack for finding open spots against zone. And he is in my opinion, a better receiving option than Morris with a higher upside. But it came down to special teams, and that's where Morris seemed to have him edged out. So big opportunity for Davidson. We know what kind of summer he has had. And now with this injury to Quentin Morris, maybe it gives him a legitimate chance here to make this 53-man roster.
You know what's really interesting to think about over the next couple of weeks is the waters are a bit muddy. We're a week out from roster cutdown day, right?
Yeah.
And we could get to next Tuesday and the Bills maybe having more than 2 players that they want to put on injured reserve to get through that final threshold. You could see the Bills keep like 2-3 players through that period because they got to put 2 others on IR and then put them immediately on injured reserve after that. And we don't know the severity for all of these, but when you're talking about a bucket of 5 players that are week to week, and then you have 2 safeties who are just getting back to do some individual work. And when Sean was asked about Edwards and Bishop and if there's any chance for them to play this weekend, it was like a definitive no. So there still could be a little bit of timeline for them. This roster cutdown day, Ryan, is going to be really interesting.
It is going to be really interesting because we just talked recently about the fact that maybe teams don't have to do those handshake parking lot deals anymore, and the Bills might have to after all. They might have to have Reed Ferguson in the parking lot once again, because if there are 4 or 5 players that are dealing with injuries, you can only put 2 of them on that IR setting your roster. They might have to move a few through and then move them to the IR after that date. Re-sign guys like Reed Ferguson. It like you said, muddies the water, makes things more complicated. But I'm sure this is something that Brandon Beane in the front office is already looking at in terms of potential options. Who are guys that they could release it with, without much dead cap on their contracts or hits that they'd have to take and then re-sign and, give them a little bit extra for doing that. So, and Mike, I guess, what did I see in the comments here? He said we're missing a lot of your questions. I may have missed them because it's a very active chat. So if you have a question, throw it in here again, and I'll take a look.
Let's talk a little bit about Ryan Vandemark, who, listen, we're talking about injuries, and this might be a great transition point because the Bills are a tackle injury away from Ryan Vandemark having a very important role on this team. And I thought that he looked good at left tackle specifically on Saturday. And that was something that we were talking about, like over the past couple of seasons. Can he be the guy that plays both sides? I feel like he's taken that kind of step this offseason. He looked comfortable. His run blocking grade really stood out to me when you posted those in the chat from PFF. I thought that he was pretty good as a pass blocker too. They dinged him on that. He gave him a 52.7. I thought he was a lot better than that. But, Vandemark, that's his strength as a pass blocker. So if he's giving you that kind of production in the run game, you're talking about a real dude there.
His development over the last 2 years has been so fun to watch when you rewatch these preseason games and you see him at training camp and how well he's performed here in Aaron Kromer's system. I think that he could start for a lot of teams across the league right now at a tackle spot. And for the Bills, they're very lucky to have him as that number 3 first guy off the bench, probably your swing tackle option, because he's gotten better in terms of run blocking. He's been solid as a pass blocker. He moves extremely well. He's very physical. There's so much to like about his game. And when you went back and watched the game against the Steelers, he just had great rep after great rep. He played a lot of reps. So this wasn't just a grade based on, 8, 10, 12 snaps. It was over 20. He really settled in well on that offensive line and was, played a big role in why they were producing on the ground in that matchup, and nothing but great things to say here. And Matt, the question that came in, I saw it in here. I have to scroll back up now. He wants to know, what about Joe Andreessen playing the Mike position and Terrell Bernard to the Will position?
Okay. So I asked Sean McDermott about this today because I'd seen some kind of conversation about this thing, like Joe Andreessen can only play middle linebacker, which I think is crazy. Like, I think he could play both spots. And Sean said that Al Holcomb specifically, since he's been here, has been cross-training him at both positions. Like, we've seen it with Dorian Williams since they drafted him. Like, you can't fall into one spot. Even Bernard, his first season, his one start was for Matt Milano on the will, at the will spot. So he didn't project necessarily as this clean-cut Mike linebacker. And here's the other piece of that kind of question. So you have Sean McDermott, who said the game plan was very basic for this game, right? Like, so Joe Andreessen can kind of get out there and play fast because he didn't probably have to worry as much about, or like, shoulder the load of having to call the entire defense and at all three levels, getting guys in the right positions. That's something that Terrell Bernard is expected to do week in and week out. So I think that would be putting a lot on the plate of an undrafted guy who earned his spot with a tryout during rookie minicamp, which is amazing. And the Joe Andreessen story gets better and better every single week. But if you're telling me that he can't play the will linebacker spot with the interchangeability of those spots, I don't believe it. And I'm also not willing to overreact hyperbolically, even though I do like to do that from time to time, and sit here and say that based on that one game, Joe Andreessen is ready to be a starting linebacker for the Buffalo Bills as an undrafted rookie in 2024, right? Like, I think this is a guy that you definitely have now tabbed as a developmental player. I think I'm all in on him making the 53-man roster, especially with the vets that you've brought in, Morrow not being able to stay healthy, Deion Jones being just okay, and a guy that maybe you could get back on your practice squad if you give him that handshake and say, we like you a part of the building, but come back, you're still learning the defense, whatever. But I don't think that you're going to change what was a borderline Pro Bowl level player in Terrell Bernard last year to make room for a UDFA rookie.
Yeah, I'm going to splash even more cold water on the Buffalo Joe story. I'm not sure he even makes a 53-man roster because of cuts across this league. You're right. Buffalo's linebacker room right now, if you're just looking solely at their linebacker room, him making the 53, I'm on board with it. But there's going to be some guys that are cut down across the league where the Bills are going to say he has a lot of valuable reps playing in live game action, someone that fits our scheme, someone that's maybe familiar or has played in the scheme before, and then an Andreessen might fall to the practice squad. He's a great story. He will be a great story. His game was unbelievable on Saturday, but it was the lack of game planning. I think in a real game, some teams might try to take advantage of over pursuits or aggressiveness and things like that. That happens in actual games. He's a little undersized. Athleticism is off the charts. I'm not willing to sit here after one tremendous, outstanding performance and say that this is a guy that's even going to make the roster, let alone start week one or play a big role week one with, Bernard and Dorian Williams, who I obviously see as the starting linebackers come week one. But I can't even sit here and say Andreessen's going to be on that 53-man roster. I've seen a lot of great preseason stories where guys show up and play very well and they still don't make the roster. And, we've seen it camp in, camp out, these guys that become fan favorites. Isabella last year, there were a lot of fans upset he didn't make the 53-man roster. There were the Brandon Rileys of the world years before that. There's always some players that pop in the preseason, do a nice job, but at the end of the day, they either one, get cut and go elsewhere, or they slide right onto the practice squad. I don't think if the Bills released Andreessen that there would be teams trying to claim him necessarily. I think that they could get him on the practice squad, but based on their linebackers and solely their linebackers, I'm not against him being on the initial 53.
Okay, a lot there. Let me get into some of that, because I will push back a little bit in that I think what Andreessen did on Saturday was different than 95% of preseason darlings, right? That was a dominant 2+ quarter performance where the production, the tape, the reaction. I saw somebody in the comment talk about Greg Cosell. I have not listened to his hit on One Bills Live yet. Whenever Greg Cosell talks about the Bills, I'm tuning in, so I'll check that out. But I watched Brian Baldinger's breakdown on Andreessen and his tape, and he raved about the kid. And I think hearing Sean talk about him today a little bit deeper and the job that he's done, I think he reminds me a bit of Christian Benford. And I know that might be like a bit of a stretch because Benford's turned into this plus starter for the Bills. But remember when he was a 6th round draft pick competing with Kyer Elam a couple years ago, nobody was thinking that he was in that conversation. And he just took things over and he just made a role for himself on the team. And so I look at a guy like Eddie Ulofoshio and Dorian Williams, who are kind of those incumbent guys. And I'm high on Dorian Williams. I think he's going to have a nice season here as he's got to kind of fit in for Matt Milano. But I do like for Dorian Williams, who has gotten banged up in the past, Terrell Bernard, who's gotten banged up in the past. I like the idea of having a guy like Andreessen who, listen, for better or worse, I like Eddie Ulofoshio. I've talked about it on the show, but Andreessen went out there and he gave you the production in a game. So I think Andreessen's making the 53-man roster. I think I'm there unless we see a big step back here Saturday. And I think he's going to get another chance to play a massive, massive role against the Panthers.
I would feel more confident saying he'll make the 53 if he can. I'm not even going to say replicate that performance because that would be very difficult to do. The way that he was flying around the field and making plays, behind the line. But if he even performs well, then I'm going to feel more comfortable. I'm just saying one snapshot's not quite enough. But with these injuries, the opportunity is certainly there for him.
I like when we disagree. I feel like that
nice.
Spices up the show. We're really in lockstep a lot of the time. And even talking to people that come out to the live shows and talks about the dynamic of the show. So whenever there's a time when we can kind of poke and prod each other a little bit, I like it. I like it, Talbot, especially when considering the events of halftime of the Pittsburgh Steelers game in the press box.
I missed your text message. I'm so sorry. So sorry.
Can I just say, wow. So I'm typing away on the computer. I'm getting after it, right? The MVS injury happened. We had to get a story up. Ryan went to go get a couple of chicken fingers. And since he was up there and I was writing the story, I texted him like, grab me a couple of chicken fingers, would you?
A few
tendies. Couple tendies. Gets back to the seat. Got a big plate, tendies and hot dogs. No tendies or hot dogs.
3 tendies.
Wait.
Half size.
No tendies.
2.5 tendies.
No tendies for Matt. Okay. So I'm like, did you see my text? And you're like, nope. So I always went back to typing because I had to work, right? Had to get it done. I didn't have time for a meal, right? I was just getting after it. So Ryan eats his food. I finish the story. I post it. I walk up to the service area. The food has been taken down. It is gone. Tendies are gone. Hot dogs are gone. Maddie's out of luck. I come back and I let him hear it. The whole ride home from Pittsburgh.
Stopped at McDonald's. He got some fries. He needed a meal because
I never eat McDonald's, Ryan.
I know.
You put that nastiness into my body. And I got to tell you, it was delicious. Those fries were delicious. I'm not going to lie.
I saw someone in the comments here talking about how Balin Spector they use the term pee down his leg because of injuries. I was almost peeing down my leg at halftime. I had to go to the bathroom. It was very cold. Air conditioner blowing on me. So that's the first thing. I had limited time. There was a line at the men's room. So I was in line. I go to the men's room. I finally get through. I then go to get food. And I will say they did put out a fresh thing of chicken tendies as soon as I got to my spot in line. So I was very lucky there. I could have gotten some fresh tendies, but I didn't get the text. I was hustling. I had to get back out there for the third quarter.
You had to check back in.
I had to check back in. And let me say this, for as much praise as I'm giving PNC Park for the Pirates, thumbs down. Thumbs down for the Steelers. I'm going to say that right now. 1, front row of the press box. You need to sit up. I'm a tall man. I had to sit up to see the whole field, Matt Parrino. 2, food spread. Very disappointing. I get it's preseason for everyone. But some overly battered chicken tendies. You didn't miss anything. Jumbo hot dog. Not great food.
This is great.
Last but not least, internet. Absolute trash. I had to keep going back and forth between their private Wi-Fi and their stadium Wi-Fi because it just could not hold up there. So terrible. They should have never changed the name from Heinz Field. They're probably cursed now. Terrible experience. Terrible experience for both of us. I'm sorry to get your tendies.
Well, thank you for that apology. Lauren, just with shots fired. Lack of planning on your part does not constitute emergency on mine. Unknown. Quote Ryan Talbot. Very nice. Yes. No, I just like giving you a hard time because it's fun. That was it was a fun trip, man.
It was a great trip.
It was a great trip.
Absolutely. Yeah, no overall trip, fantastic, but thumbs down on their stadium, which I'm surprised to say. I was expecting good things.
All right, here we go. That'll do it for this episode. The Bills practice tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll see what practice is like tomorrow, if we're going to do a post-practice show. If not, we'll be back on Wednesday night for our weekly edition. And, man, we are creeping towards that final cutdown day. It is going to be a busy Tuesday next week. For Ryan Talbot, I'm Matt Parrino. August 31st, Wingnuts, 1402 Millersport Highway. Come out. We hope to see you all there. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.